Hey guys, tonight we venture into a world where the horizon bleeds gold by day and the sand transforms into a million restless needles. By night, you'll feel that sunburn on your eyelids and taste grit like you're chewing on fine talcum powder. And you probably won't survive this without a strong beverage or two. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments so I know where in the world you're joining from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across dunes that shift like living waves, your footprints swallowed almost as soon as they form. Each gust of wind slaps against your face, carrying whispers of ancient sleepless nights. The desert around you feels uncannily alive. Scorpion burrows yawn at your feet, and distant echoes suggest ghost caravans circling beneath those moonlit ridges. Nights here stretch longer than a camel's shadow, and you quickly learn that the heat of the day is nothing compared to the chill of insomnia that creeps in after sundown. In the first centuries CE, the kingdom of Aksum towered in this very region, controlling Red Sea trade routes and weaving incense-scented silks through bustling ports, an empire built on commerce and the occasional camel sneeze joke, "Bless you, big guy." Historians still argue whether these merchants slept in makeshift tents or rosewood huts. But everyone agrees that sandstorms were a universal annoyance, like 30,000 tiny alarm clocks set to go off all night long. As twilight bleeds orange into violet, you crawl into a tent fashioned from goat hide. The fabric offers scant relief from the lingering warmth trapped in the sand. You probably won't realize until too late that goat hide tents are about as breathable as a wool sweater in midsummer. You try to flatten a cushion stuffed with date palm fibers, but within seconds, it feels like you're resting your head on a miniature porcupine. A fringe remedy recorded on a papyrus scroll suggests burying your head under a damp clay mask to trap moisture. And while the hiss of evaporation is oddly soothing, you're essentially giving yourself a mud facial at 2 a.m., which is either spa treatment or the prelude to a cheesy horror scene you'll call. Night winds kick up grains that dance like fireflies in the lamp's glow, each one finding its way into every crevice of your tent. You sniff ginger-scented oil applied to your temples, another technique detailed by Abyssinian healers, hoping the spicy aroma will lull your mind. Rumor has it they also rubbed camel fat salves under their eyes to prevent eyelid chafing. Talk about beauty sleep gone wrong. Amid the gentle crackling of coals in the brazier, you recite a half-forgotten chant. May the desert hush its tone and grant me sweet repose, though you suspect that chant was cribbed from a shepherd's lullaby rather than official medical lore. An offbeat tidbit mentions donkey milk foot baths as a cure. You imagine soaking tired feet in slightly sour milk, picturing a gaggle of goats judging your life choices. The scrolls even suggest placing a small satchel of roasted frankincense under your pillow to release calming incense vapors. Smart. except every time the wind shifts, you cough as if you've inhaled 1,000 incense sticks. As midnight approaches, you notice the temperature plummet. The desert cools faster than a dropped smartphone, and goosebumps prickle across your arms. Some travelers remind themselves that hypothermia can be a real threat here, nature's cruel double feature scorch by day, freeze by night. You marvel that these drought-scarred plains host a bizarre ballet of extremes, the temperature swinging up to 120 to 49 degrees by day and down to near freezing by morning. You press your ear to the tent wall and swear you hear distant ram calls mingling with the wind's howl. You reach for a clay flask filled with cinnamon and myrrh tea, a recipe that dates back to at least the 4th century in local herbal manuals. One historian notes that Aksumite traders prized cinnamon so highly they used it as currency talk about spice insurance. Yet some skeptics question whether these teas did more than warm the throat. Historians still argue whether the placebo effect was the true sleep inducer. A sudden sand gust rattles the tent pole, yanking you upright in a half-dream panic. You mutter a sleepy joke, "I'd invite you in sand, but you're a terrible guest," and slump back onto your makeshift bed. The final trick, according to a dusty scroll fragment, involves focusing on the stars overhead. Count constellations named after hyenas and jackals until your eyelids droop. As you lie on that rough blanket, your mind drifts toward the tales of nightly camel caravans, their drivers singing lullabies that echoed across dunes, riding rhythms that almost hypnotized them into dozing mid-rains. An eerie calm envelops you, and you feel your heart slow. The trauma of sand in your teeth becomes a distant memory replaced by a gentle lull. Somewhere between counting jackal stars and imagining sand turning moonlit silver sleep finally edges and soft as a whisper on a desert breeze. You roll aside a stray fistful of sand that snuck under your blanket. Remember that gaggle of grains dancing like fireflies? The moon hangs low, a silver sentinel over rippling dunes, and you feel its cool glow seep through goat-hide walls. The air here carries an uncanny harmony. Every twig snap and sigh of wind seems choreographed to lull you. Yet each shift in the canvas stirs a fresh twitch of unease. You press your cheek to the woven mat, tracing its coarse texture with your palm, and remind yourself that you're not alone. Ancient spirits are said to glide on these gusts, offering comfort or mischief in equal measure. By the 6th century, CE Ethiopian caravans regularly paused at oases like Yeha and Adulis, their traders weaving tents from camel hair to weather the nocturnal chill, an innovation that spread southward into the Horn of Africa's highlands. Historians still argue whether these early tents were purely pragmatic or if they doubled as portable temples for impromptu worship beneath the stars. But everyone agrees that cracking camp under a full moon was a ritual of sorts, a borderline spiritual experience. You imagine those merchants kneeling on sand, bowing their heads in silent gratitude for a rare moment of peace After a day spent dodging marauding bandits and negotiating spice prices, a soft moan of fabric against wood draws your attention to the tent flap, where the canvas billows like the skirt of a ghostly dancer in the breeze. You hear a distant howl, maybe a jackal, maybe your own imagination playing tricks. Fringe oral traditions mention a wind spirit named Hema, who whispers secrets of the desert to weary ears. If you listen closely, you might glean tips on where to find hidden wells or undead treasures buried beneath dunes. You shake your head, rubbing your temples with cinnamon-scented oil to chase away these sidelong thoughts. But you can't deny the thrill that comes from the possibility of hidden knowledge lurking in every whisper. Your ears tune into the rhythm of the wind, a low, constant hum, punctuated by sudden hisses as sand scuttles along the tent seams. The ambient score feels almost orchestrated, like some ancient composer wrote the sheet music for nighttime ambiences to coax travelers into slumber. A quirky tidbit scrawled on a 12th century scroll recounts how certain clans believed the desert sands could sing at midnight, producing harmonics that only the most attuned listeners could hear. You lift a corner of your blanket, hoping to catch the song of sands, but all you perceive is the faint murmuring of earth brushing earth. To settle your mind, you recall a mainstream historical fact. The famed rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, carved during the 12th century CE, were often sites for nocturnal pilgrimages. Pilgrims would sleep on terraces under star-studded skies, their prayers drifting upward like incense. You imagine their humble mats lined up on stone ledges, each traveler gazing skyward through cathedral windows hewn from solid rock. Were they soothed by the same steady breath of wind that now rustles your tent? Historians still argue whether these pilgrimages aimed more at physical penance or at cultivating intimate communion with the heavens, but the wind's breath surely played a role in those silent vigils. You shift to a more comfortable position, nestling your head on a bundle of date palm fronds. The scent of dried fruit mingles with muskier notes of camel hair, an aroma so specific that even after you've washed your tunic twice, it clings to your senses like an old memory. Night insects buzz just beyond the flaps, a distant cicada chorus that seems oddly out of place in a desert setting. A fringe account from an obscure Ethiopian monk claims that nomadic tribes sometimes brought jars of honey to scatter outside their tents, believing the insects would gather on the sweet pools and hum themselves into a sugar-induced trance, thus sparing camp dwellers from their nightly serenade. You chuckle at the mental image of sticky droplets and sleepy flies before reminding yourself to lean into the moment rather than fight it. Your heartbeat slows as the wind's tempo softens to an intermittent sigh, like exhalations from some enormous slumbering beast beneath the dunes. You close your eyes and let that breath wash over you, picturing yourself reclining atop a smooth sandstone cliff, the vast desert unfolding beneath like a silken tapestry. A lullaby echo from your childhood drifts into your mind, but here it's reframed in ancient meter, O sand of ages, hush your song. Grant weary bones a place to belong. You murmur the words aloud, even though you suspect they're cobbled together from various sources. A playful dig at yourself, you're mixing bedtime ditties with desert lore, but it works. The tent creaks as the wind shifts direction, and you feel a slight draft at your neck. You bury your chin into the fronds, drawing in the earthy tang of date palm and dust. Somewhere beyond the canvas, an owl hoots a reminder that desert nights aren't exclusively the domain of prowling predators. Birds of prey often roost in the jagged cliffs that skirt the sands, swooping down to hunt at dawn's first light. A traveler's guide from the 10th century CE even suggests fashioning rudimentary owl calls to mimic their sound, believing the majestic creature's presence would ward off malevolent spirits. You tap a finger against the tent pole, amused at the lengths to which humans will go for a bit of psychological comfort. Your thoughts drift to water, that most precious commodity. You recall how each breeze once carried hints of distant oases, promises of fresh wells and palm-shaded pools, though your own canteen is nearly empty. Tonight's wind brings only the scent of emptiness and sandy drift. Yet some texts claim that savvy desert dwellers could detect subtle moisture cues in the wind. A slightly sweeter note might indicate a seep or hidden spring. Scholars still argue whether these moisture readings were genuine science or elaborate folklore, but the notion that the very air you breathe could betray subterranean life holds a mesmerizing appeal. As your eyelids grow heavy, you think of the protective rituals performed at dusk. Some healers recommended sprinkling a pinch of salt around the tent's perimeter to create an invisible barrier against nighttime wanderers, both animal and spirit. An odd footnote elaborates that sprinkling crushed frankincense instead might invite guardian angels to hover nearby. You imagine the glowing embers of incense drifting in the breeze, mingling with moonbeams to form ghostly ribbons of light. A gentle smile tugs at your lips. Whether barrier or beacon, the ritual underscores your innate yearning for safety in this vast, indifferent landscape. The moon slides behind a thin veil of clouds, dimming to a silvery ghostlight that leaves the dunes in half shadows. Your breathing syncs with the wind's lingering exhale, and your mind starts to drift toward dream territory. You replay that camel hair tent innovation, picturing caravans on ancient trade routes as they did centuries ago, their merchants lulled by the same whispering chorus. In that imagined caravan, you share a flask of spiced tea, swapping tales of starlit visions and wind-borne whispers that guided you to secret watering holes. A final gust rattles the tent pole, then retreats into silence. You sense the desert itself holding its breath as if granting you passage into sleep. Beneath your palm, the woven mat feels cool, and for the first time all night, you imagine sleep not as a distant oasis, but as a reachable shore. You wake to the faint rustle of your scroll pouch, shifting against the cool sand, and for a moment, you forget you're hundreds of miles from any library until the wind scours the tent again and you're back under that goat hide roof. You stretch fingers, brushing against brittle sheets of papyrus, peeking from a leather wrap. These Ancient pages feel oddly alive beneath your touch, as if each reed strand still hums the echo of inked words from centuries past. You probably won't fully appreciate the magic until you crack the bamboo stylus and watch how it grazes the surface, dispersing soot-black ink across those fibrous lines. Papyrus, as you might recall, first emerged along the Nile Delta around 3000 BCE, when Egyptian scribes pressed and layered the pith of the papyrus plant into waterproof sheets, an innovation that transformed record-keeping and knowledge-sharing across the ancient world. It's a mainstream historical fact that Egyptian merchants traded bundles of papyrus up the Red Sea route to ports like Adulis, from where merchants transported them inland to Axum and beyond. Traders prized these scrolls like currency, carefully stashing them in camel caravans alongside frankincense and gold dust. Historians still argue whether Abyssinian healers annotated these imported scrolls directly or recopied their wisdom onto locally sourced parchment, but either way, those reed sheets shape the medical traditions you're tracing. You unfurl one scroll, its margins annotated with tiny symbols that look like ancient shorthand or maybe doodles made by bored apprentices. Fringe lore insists that some scribes believed each stroke carried a spark of divine power. Dip your quill into a mixture of donkey milk and soot, they said, and you'd inscribe words that heal body and soul. You raise an eyebrow, donkey milk, as an ink binder sounds like a recipe for moldy doom. Yet some healing texts recommend brewing the leftover ink dregs into a poultice for aching joints. You chuckle to yourself, the same stuff that clogs your quill might just loosen up your creaky knees. To prepare the papyrus, scribes soaked the pith strips until they could press them flat, without snapping, a process that could take days in shaded workshops near the Nile. Here in the desert, you imagine those Aksumite scholars converting goatskin drums into makeshift presses, layering sheets between smooth stones and weighing them down with clay-filled jars. You trace a faded crease on the scroll and wonder whether that line marks an ancient fold from storage in a chest or the careless slip of a healer's hand. Scholars still debate whether these scrolls were widely circulated among learned families or jealously guarded by priest healers in monastic enclaves. But the overlapping ink layers suggest they were at least recopied during communal gatherings. One curious tidbit scrawled in the margin draws your eye, a tiny sketch of a hyena peering at a moonlit oasis. The caption reads, "When the hyena sings, mark the hour," a reference to how nocturnal creatures help time the administration of certain sedative potions. You grin at the image. Hyenas don't exactly serenade like songbirds, more like cackling hyena laughs. But the healer's point stands. You tuck that scroll under your chin and shiver slightly as the wind slips beneath your collar. Those same hyenas might be laughing at your plight right now, circling invisible temptations just beyond the tent flap. Flipping to the next sheet, you find a recipe detailing the creation of ink itself. Mainstream sources confirm that Aksumite scribes combined soot from burnt animal fats, often from goats or camels, with gum arabic to bind pigment to papyrus. Gum arabic harvested from wild acacia trees dotting the northern highlands added just enough stickiness for quills to glide without bleeding. Yet a fringe theory whispered among scroll collectors today claims that certain mystic scrolls used powdered ground rhino horn in their ink to confer extra potency, though the ethics and legality of such ingredients have long sparked outrage. Historians still argue whether any legitimate texts actually employed rhino byproducts or if that's merely opportunistic rumor. But the idea of inching a quill dipped in magical rhino ink feels like something straight out of a fantasy novel. You rub your eyes imagining those scribes hunched over a stone bench, quill in hand, and lanterns flickering low. The lamp oil would have been a blend of sesame or castor bean oil, though some healers preferred the smoky aroma of wild date palm kernels. Rumor has it that inhaling a few drips of sesame oil vapors between scroll readings acted as an early form of aromatherapy, at least according to one 9th century healer's diary, now preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church's archives. It's tempting to test that yourself, but you're more interested in how those words on papyrus survived 2 millennia of heat, humidity, and occasional termite genocide. One particularly worn section describes the hierarchy of healers. At the top sat the Kuhes priest, who oversaw the scroll's interpretation and often added marginalia in Ge'ez, the liturgical tongue of the Ethiopian Church. Below the Kuhes were the Deborah lay scholars who transcribed, translated, and sometimes miscopied crucial information. Imagine a medieval scribe misreading a cup of myrrh as a cup of mirth, and suddenly your sedative tea comes with a side of laughter. You suppress a snort, picturing a half-asleep traveler guffawing into his mug, startling his own camels awake. The scroll's texture under your fingertips shifts as you move to a sturdier portion where papyrus met parchment. You wonder when the transition occurred. Did healers find goat hide parchment more durable against mold and tears? A widespread view holds that by the 7th century CE, many scribes in the Ethiopian highlands preferred thick animal skins for texts meant to endure pilgrimage and warfare. Yet some argue those parchments were reserved for holy scriptures, while medical treatises stayed on cheaper papyrus to allow easier disposal if a remedy proved dangerous. The debate plays quietly in academic journals, but to you, it underscores the precarious journey. Each scroll took one wrong spill of camel coffee, and an entire page of insomnia cures could be lost forever. You locate a burned edge on the scroll margin, evidence of a kitchen mishap or a near miss with brazier embers. A mainstream historical fact notes that medieval Ethiopian kitchens often doubled as scriptoria, since olive oil lamps and cooking fires shared the same hearth. Historians still argue whether this was a cost-saving measure or a sacred blend of nourishment and knowledge. But either way, the resulting scorch marks add character and practical headaches to modern preservationists. A stray sand grain embeds in the ink of one line that reads, "Mix frankincense, ash, and clay to form a nasal inhalant." You pause, picturing the process, grinding incense to ash, blending it with clay until it looks like the driest toothpaste imaginable, then inhaling through trembling nostrils. You might dismiss that as too abrasive, yet you recall trying a pinch of myrrh dust under your nose last night, choking, yes, but oddly clarifying, like waking your brain from its fog. Maybe there's something to these daring remedies after all. Folding the scroll carefully, you tuck it back into its leather satchel alongside a small clay jar sealed with beeswax. It contains pulverized cinnamon and ginger, the base for a warming brew recommended for restless nights. You can almost taste that spicy swirl on your tongue. Imagine the way it settles in your chest, coaxing your heartbeat to slow. As you secure the pouch, you remark softly, "If only scribes had noted how to stop windstorms, we'd all sleep better." You smile at your own joke, the one about wind and insomnia. Seems to have eternal relevance here. You lean back on your elbow, watching the scroll's leather strap sway against the canvas. Somewhere beyond the tent, the wind song has shifted to a softer refrain. The papyrus scrolls may have begun their lives in lush Nile workshops, but now they sit with you in this stark desert, bridging cultures and climates. In those reed layers lies centuries of trial and error, triumphs and follies of healers who, like you, sought one thing above all, the elusive gift of sleep. The tent creaks again, as if affirming your thought, and you let your head rest on the rolled-up scrolls themselves, worn and faithful companions. The world outside may argue endlessly over the scroll's provenance and preservation. But for now, under this moonlit sky, their purpose is clear: to bring you closer, to rest, one inked reed at a time. You peel back the goat hide flap and step into the crisp, pre-dawn chill, inhaling a breath that tastes of distant rain and crushed time. The moon has slid behind the horizon, but a pale glow still lingers on the highland ridges, illuminating tufts of sagebrush and bristle of wild rue. You bend to pluck a cluster of fuzzy gray leaves. Local healers call it tedra, a cousin of our common sage that's said to settle frayed nerves like a lullaby sung by mountain winds. As you rub the leaves between your fingertips, their resinous scent buds awake, evoking memories of herbal sachets tucked under your pillow at home, minus the faint whiff of lavender your neighbor insisted smelled like baby powder gone rogue. By the 4th century, CE Ethiopian monastic gardens, especially around Debre Libanos, cultivated these highland herbs not just for ritual incense but for medicinal brews to tame anxiety and insomnia. Mainstream historians note that manuscripts from that era list over 20 native plants with soporific properties. Historians still argue whether monks shared these infusions widely or reserved them for aristocratic pilgrims. But either way, that verdant knowledge spread along pilgrim trails like a well-guarded secret. You pinch a sprig of tedra and chew it, gently feeling a subtle cooling tingle on your tongue, as though the mountain itself were whispering, "Hey, slow down, champ." A short hop from your feet lies a patch of cat bushes, glossy green leaves trembling in the breeze. Yes, cat, the same stimulant that modern backpackers chew at dawn to chase away jet lag, though here ancient healers harnessed its more sedative stems. Fringe lore suggests they harvested cat before full bloom then wilted the leaves overnight under cool rocks to mellow its jangly alkaloids, creating a gentle calm rather than an energetic buzz. You roll your eyes at the thought, caught polite enough to lull you to sleep. That's like teaching a rooster to cluck Beethoven lullabies. You crush a handful of dried cat stems into a crude mortar made from volcanic stone, adding chipped cinnamon bark and a pinch of wild ginger root. The spicy aroma hisses upward, reminding you of modern chai lattes without the frothy hipster nonsense. You suspect the cinnamon was an imported luxury Oxamite trader shipped it from far-flung cinnamon islands, bartering gold dust and ivory. In exchange, yet local versions used bark from indigenous Acocanthera trees, yielding a subtly different warmth. Historians still argue whether those exotic spices were staples or rare treats. But everyone agrees that cinnamon's status as both medicine and condiment made it the original kitchen multitasker. A quirky tidbit from a fragmentary scroll mentions canna, a succulent imported through Red Sea trade routes, prized for its mild euphoric effects. Some fringe researchers claim limited canna cultivation took root in sheltered grottos near Lake Tana, though mainstream scholarship doubts the climate ever truly suited the plant. You laugh at the image of Ethiopian monks tending aloe-like succulents in rock crevices, sprinkling holy water and humming Gregorian-like hymns in Ge'ez. Whether they actually grew canna or simply dreamed of it, the very idea highlights how ancient healers experimented, boldly blurring borders between local flora and imported novelties. You gather wild hops, those clustered yellow-green cones tucked under lupine leaves. Despite hops' European fame, an Ethiopian cousin called Tef Drop showed up in medical notes by the 7th century, valued for its bitter sedative qualities. You roll a few cones between your palms, releasing a piney scent that hits you like a nostalgic greeting card, familiar but just out of reach. You drop them into a clay jug, then fill it with chilled well water drawn from last night's dew. Catch a ritual some caravanners believed bestowed extra potency. A footnote in one scroll warns that dew collected under a waxing moon was more effective than during a waning moon. But whether that lunar detail is science or superstition remains a hot debate among modern ethnobotanists. As dawn's first rosy tendrils crest the peaks, you ignite a small fire in your brazier. You tuck a few bundles of dried tedra and hops into a shallow bowl of volcanic rock, letting the herb's oils vaporize gently. The steam curls upward, tinged with faint sweetness and herbaceous musk. You lean in, closing your eyes and inhaling deeply an ancient form of aromatherapy, minus the overpriced diffusers and salt lamps. A healer's note scratched in margins suggests enhancing the steam with droplets of myrrh oil, though you suspect that was added more for spiritual gravitas than actual efficacy. While you wait for the vapor to take effect, you chew a sliver of licorice root, another highland specialty. Mainstream chronicles record that Ethiopian traders used licorice as a sweetener and digestive aid, and by extension, as a mild sedative to quiet, restless stomachs at night. Fringe stories exaggerate that hospitality hosts offered guests licorice staves to ward off nightmares. Imagine munching on a stick of licorice before hitting the hay in your modern hotel room. You smirk at yourself. Swapping hotel chocolates for twigs of licorice doesn't exactly feel like luxury, but hey, you're in the desert. With the herbs crackling in the brazier, the aromatic fog blankets you. Your eyelids grow heavy, and that familiar hum of highland breeze in your hair seems to coalesce into a lullaby. You think of the monastery garden's rows of medicinal flora tended by candlelight, each plant a living testament to human ingenuity and hope. Yet some scholars still argue whether these gardens were primarily botanical research centers or symbolic sanctuaries where monks meditated on creation's harmony. Here, under the rising sun, you feel those debates fade away, replaced by the simple magic of scent and steam. You dampen a scrap of linen with the herbal decoction, an old trick for hot packs, and press it behind your neck. The warmth seeps into your muscles, coaxing tension to loosen like hardened clay, softened by rain. A playful thought crosses your mind. If only you could wrap your entire body in a tedra-infused blanket, you'd never leave this spot. You reach for a final sprig of sagebrush, crushing it between thumb and forefinger as you whisper, "Sleep, don't desert me now." Joke fully intended. You fall back onto your date palm mat, letting the highland herb's fragrant lull wash over you. Somewhere on the horizon, the first birds begin their morning chorus, but you feel insulated from their dawn song symphony, as though you're wrapped in a private world of quiet calm. The scroll spoke of this sensory blend, scent, steam, and chant, forming a triad of sleepy alchemy that modern researchers are only beginning to appreciate. Historians still argue whether these remedies worked through biochemical pathways or mere placebo. But for you, under this highland sky, scented with sage and cinnamon, the origin of relief doesn't matter. You slide your bare feet into a shallow basin filled with lukewarm donkey milk, the creamy liquid swirling around your toes like pale silk. The texture is unexpectedly smooth, almost velvety against your skin, and you inhale the faint aroma of hay and fresh grass. The very scent that convinced ancient travelers this remedy was worth trying. You probably won't find this in your average spa menu, but donkey milk foot baths were a go-to cure for desert insomnia in certain Ethiopian caravans praised for their gentle lactic acid content that supposedly softened rough skin and calmed frayed nerves. A mainstream historical fact, donkey milk has been valued since antiquity. Pliny the Elder even noted Roman matriarchs bathing in it to preserve youthful skin, highlighting how far-flung medical traditions converged across empires. In Ethiopia, scattered texts from as early as the 5th century CE reference the milk of the patient's steadfast steed as both tonic and topical treatment. Historians still argue whether these remedies migrated from Mediterranean influences or emerged independently among highland pastoralists. But the persistent echo of donkey milk baths in multiple sources suggests a widespread appeal regardless of origin. As you wiggle your toes, you notice tiny bubbles forming where the milk meets the air, and you recall a quirky tidbit scrawled on a fragmentary scroll. Some healers claimed that mixing donkey milk with powdered frankincense created an effervescent fizz that released calming vapors. Imagine tiny milky geysers coaxing you toward sleep. You lean back, picturing yourself lying in a shallow hammock with miniature milk springs tickling your soles, which is either the height of luxury or a bizarre choreographed farm ritual. Regardless, the idea sparks a smile, and that playfulness helps steady your racing thoughts. The basin rests on a woven mat of date palm fibers which feels spongy under your ankles. You remember that camel hair tents often doubled as primal foot spas when camp water was scarce. Just a handful of donkey milk went much further than a bucket of sand-choked well water. Yet a fringe remedy suggests adding ground termite alates to the milk to enhance its dream-sowing potency, though you shudder at the thought of crunchy insects swirling between your toes. Some travelers swore this produced vivid prophetic dreams, though modern scholars still debate whether any active compounds survived the mixing process, or if it was merely a placebo amplified by expectation. You lift a foot to examine the milk-softened skin. Tiny flakes of dried clay and grit wash away in the milky swish, revealing tender pink soles that feel paradoxically both soothed and ticklish. A playful, you probably won't mind a little pampering joke escapes your lips, and you imagine ancient merchants chuckling as they soak their feet after a long day bartering spices and silks. The juxtaposition of dusty roads and plush donkey milk spas underscores how ancient healers sought balance, grit, and luxury wild and tame, all in service of restful nights. You dip your hands into the basin and swirl the milk around, lifting fragrant droplets to your nose. A note of hay gives way to a subtle sweetness. Later scrolls even prescribed adding a dash of honeycomb to the bath for extra viscosity and scent. You think of villagers dipping combs into hives at dawn, then walking sheepishly through camp with sticky footprints, earning both relief and curious glances. Historians still argue whether honey-infused donkey baths were mainstream or mere eccentric experiments. But the overlap of honey's antimicrobial reputation and donkey milk's emollient properties makes it plausible even to modernize. Leaning closer, you let a few droplets trickle down your forearm, marveling at how a simple animal product can bridge the gap between biology and belief. You likely won't find peer-reviewed studies on donkey milk's sleep-inducing effects. Most knowledge passed down orally or in scribal margins. But the continued recounting of these treatments hints at genuine efficacy, or at least the power of ritual to signal your mind that it's time to rest. Next to the basin sits a small pouch tied with braided goat hair string. You open it to reveal dried goat placenta, yes, placenta, a fringe remedy touted for its rich hormone content to rebalance internal rhythms. You catch yourself smirking. Goat placenta tea seems a hard sell, until you recall that many cultures have revered placental concoctions for postpartum vitality. Whether sipping placenta tea before bed actually nudges you toward REM sleep is up for debate. Scholars still argue whether these maternal tissues could confer hormonal benefits when ingested, or if the whole practice was symbolic comfort. Deciding goats aren't your spirit animal. Tonight, you tuck the pouch away and return your attention to the milk bath. You close your eyes and let the warmth seep into the arches of your feet, feeling tension ebb like sand slipping between your fingers. The basin rocks gently on the uneven ground, its motion aligning with the wind-borne lullaby outside. You murmur a playful aside, the only spa in the desert where your masseuse has 4 legs, and that light humor eases you further. You lift a leather ewer and pour a trickle of camel fat salve into the bath. Camel fat, rendered smooth and perfumed with desert herbs, floats like oil droplets on the milk surface. A mainstream historical fact, camel fat was prized in Nubian and Ethiopian medicine for its emollient and thermal properties, used to seal wounds and soothe chapped skin. Mixed here, it forms a slick film that locks in moisture and might just dampen the chill you felt when the night's temperature dipped earlier. Historians still argue whether combining milk and fat in this way offered real biochemical synergy, or if it was an indulgent novelty. But the feel of warmth locked into your skin is hard to dispute. With feet glistening, you stand and wrap them in a thin linen cloth, an impromptu booty to rest in later. You pat the excess milk from your ankles, feeling every hair stand on end at the contact. A flicker of moonlight through the tent seam casts shifting patterns on the cloth, and you almost imagine hoof prints dancing around you. You probably won't remember them in the morning, but right now they feel like gentle reminders that you're part of a lineage of dream seekers who experimented fearlessly. You settle back onto your date palm mat feet, propped on a rolled balsam-filled pillow. The shadow play on your eyelids looks like wandering goats in a miniature theater, and you let that image carry you. Somewhere between the creamy warmth, the camel fat sheen, and the ritual's absurdity, your mind begins to untangle itself from daily worries. You recall that donkey bath scroll also recommended reciting a chant while soaking milk of dusk. Hush, my mind. Open gates where dreams unwind, and you whisper it softly, even though you suspect it was cribbed from a shepherd's bedtime rhyme. A final swirl of the basin, a gentle pat dry with the linen, and you tuck your feet into goatskin moccasins, seasoned by time and ritual. The fabric hugs your arches in a comforting squeeze, anchoring you in this moment of quiet transition. You press your heels into the mat, imagining each pressure point signaling your nervous system to power down. The wind's hum returns, now softened by the goat hide walls, carrying scents of tedra and cinnamon from your earlier herbal rituals. You lie back, feet elevated and heart steady. The basin of donkey milk remains by your side like a sentinel, empty now, but still holding the promise of restful sleep. The desert beyond the tent seems to exhale in unison with you, as if granting consent for your journey into dreams. And there, in the gentle interplay of animal milk's sacred chants and midnight breezes, you surrender to a slumber as exotic and earnest as the ancient scrolls that guided you here. You cradle a chipped clay cup warmed by coals, its rim nicked from centuries of use, and pour in a steaming brew that blends powdered cinnamon bark, grated ginger root, and a whisper of crushed myrrh. The aroma blooms immediately sharp and sweet, like a punchy chai latte without the barista snootiness, and you probably won't find this at your local coffee chain, though you'd pay good dirhams for a sip. As steam curls around your fingers, you inhale deeply, tasting woody spice and resinous smoke that swirl together like an exotic lullaby. Cinnamon, traded far beyond Aksum's markets, first appeared in documented Egyptian recipes around 2000 BCE, an expensive luxury prized by pharaohs and Pharisees alike. Mainstream historical sources note that by the 1st century CE, Aksumite merchants were importing it via the Red Sea spice routes, bartering gold and ivory for its sweet bark. Historians still argue whether early Ethiopian brewers used true Ceylon cinnamon or a native surrogate from the highlands. But either way, the scent of cinnamon signaled both comfort and status. You swirl the brew, watching fine ginger shreds drift like autumn leaves in water. Ginger's warming zing hits your nose, tickling you awake even as you seek sleep. Ancient scroll fragments credit ginger with tending the humors, calming the body's internal tensions before nightfall. Fringe lore goes further, claiming certain mystics added powdered scorpion tail to amplify ginger's awakening power, then balanced it with myrrh's soporific heft. Though you're skeptical that scorpion venom made for a smooth bedtime tea, you smirk, imagining your own tongue jolting awake, muttering, "Who put the sting in my slumber?" Myrrh, on the other hand, brings a deep balsamic note that rounds out the blend. Pilgrims to Lalibela reportedly carried myrrh-infused wines to calm nerves before climbing those monolithic churches by torchlight. A quirky tidbit tucked in a marginal note suggests that some caravan cooks let myrrh sticks steep overnight under a full moon to charge the brew with lunar energy, because nothing says sleep like a caffeinated moon ritual. Whether those lunar-charged tinctures did anything beyond inspiring poetry is debatable, and modern researchers still argue whether moonlight actually alters resin chemistry or if it's just poetic license. You take your first sip, and the warmth unspools through your chest, loosening knotted tension. The ginger kick jolts your senses just enough to ward off intrusive thoughts about tomorrow's caravan breakdown, then settles as the cinnamon smooths over your tongue like creamy honey. Myrrh's smoky undertones trail behind, grounding you in earthen calm. It's an alchemy of flavor that feels both ancient and eerily modern, like sipping a spa day in a cup. As the brew cools, you stir in a sliver of date honey, watching golden threads swirl into the reddish tea. Mainstream botanical manuals record that Ethiopian healers prize date honey not only for sweetness, but for its prebiotic kick, promoting gut comfort, because nothing sabotages sleep faster than a rumbling belly. Historians still argue whether dates were primary sweeteners or whether imported cane sugar played a larger role by the medieval era. But witnessing those honey ribbons dissolving feels like watching time-lapse history inside a teacup. Between sips, you lean back and trace the cup's lip with your thumb, feeling the tiny chips and ridges, tactile reminders of every hand that's held this vessel before you. A fringe account claims some brewers etched secret dream formulas into their cups' interiors, visible only when tea stains revealed them. Think hidden hieroglyphics appearing like faded tattoos. You squint at your own cup, half expecting arcane symbols to materialize and joke, "Great, I'll be haunted by caffeinated runes in my dreams." The night air drifts in through the tent flap, cool against your cheeks. You lift the cup to your nose again, closing your eyes as cinnamon scent envelops you. Modern smelling studies suggest that certain spice combinations can modulate brain waves, nudging alpha rhythms toward relaxation. Fringe herbalists insist that myrrh's methyl salicylate content acts as a mild psychoactive, though scholars still argue whether any sleep benefit derives from chemistry or from centuries of ritual expectation. Either way, your heartbeat slows in the candlelit hush. You pour a second cup, wary that too much caffeine might backfire. Ancient medics warned against overindulgence in ginger teas, lest you end up with the jitters, not the snooze. You nod at that caution. No one wants a midnight sprint across the dunes fueled by overspiced brew. Instead, you sip methodically, pausing to savor the interplay of warmth and earthiness. Each swallow feels like a handshake with history, an intimate exchange across time that binds you to anonymous brewmasters who perfected these recipes through trial, error, and occasional stomach tantrums. A final joke drifts to your lips. If only they'd let me hang an espresso machine in the tent, I'd call it a night. But you know coffee wasn't in the original toolkit. Local legend pins coffee's discovery in nearby Kaffa. Centuries later, ginger spiced tea was the desert's own answer to alertness turned relaxation, a clever paradox embodied in every sip. You set the empty cup aside, its last drop sliding down the clay like a farewell. Around you, the tent's shadows deepen, and you feel a mellow warmth radiate from your core. The mingled scents of cinnamon, ginger, honey, and myrrh linger in the air, a private lullaby for your senses. As you nestle into your mat, the memory of that brew's gentle haze nudges you toward dreams. The steam's final wisps seem to dissolve into the tent walls, carrying away your daytime worries on an aromatic exhalation. You lift a shallow bowl of fine ochre clay, its powder soft as cornstarch, and cradle it close to your face. One sniff, and you're hit by that earthy halo of mineral vitae, like you've just dug your fingers into the planet's pulse. The healers called it land mist, a blend of desert clay and ground basalt, that when inhaled gently was said to lull the mind into a fugue state of ease. You probably won't find this clay aromatherapy on any modern spa menu, but ancient Ethiopian physicians swore by it so much, so that travelers tucked small leather pouches of powdered clay into their camp kits, bringing a peace of the earth's hush along on every caravan. By the 9th century, CE medical treatises from the Gunda Gunda monastery documented the practice of clay inhalations as part of a broader mineral therapy system. Mainstream historians note that these texts include instructions to sift Sahara dust through fine linen to isolate calming particulates. Historians still argue whether those monastic healers refined the clay for purity or simply relied on the desert wind's natural filtration. But either way, the concept of inhaling earth to induce slumber spread along trade routes like a quiet footprint in the sand. You tilt your head back, letting a gentle breeze carry microscopic clay motes into your nostrils. Tickle, tickle, until you feel an odd coolness settle behind your eyes. It's as if the desert floor itself has conspired to soften your thoughts, grinding down jagged tangents into gentle hillocks of drowsy calm. A quirky tidbit scribbled in a margin mentions that some fringe healers added traces of chrysocolla, a turquoise-green copper ore, to the blend, believing its crystalline energy would tune the brain's sleep frequencies. You pause, picturing a sparkling swirl of copper dust dancing before you, and wonder whether your dreams might turn metallic blue. You lean back on your mat, inhaling slowly. The clay's aroma is grounding somewhere between petrichor after a rare desert rain and the damp hush beneath an overhanging rock. You feel your heartbeat soften its tempo, and the world outside your tent seems to dim, as if you've drawn a velvet curtain across reality. That sensation reminds you of the spicy steam ritual from earlier combined olfactory cues, and your brain starts ping-ponging between memory and myth, rewiring itself for sleep. Local lore also describes clay masks for the face, another mineral magic trick to calm the senses. You spread a paste of clay and water across your cheeks and forehead, the texture thick and cool, sticking your skin into a crosshatch of drying cracks. This face mask tradition dates back to at least the era of King Caleb's 6th century CE, when royal physicians reportedly coated noble skins to seal out worries. Before bedside storytelling, mainstream researchers still argue whether these masks had any biochemical effect or were purely placebo. But modern dermatologists have resurrected kaolinite masks for their oil-absorbing benefits, proof that sometimes what soothes the skin also soothes the mind. As the clay stiffens, a mild tingling sensation spreads across your face. You close your eyes, the mask pressing gently against your eyelids, turning your vision into a tapestry of muted gray. A playful thought crosses your mind. I'm literally wearing the desert to sleep. And you snort, imagining yourself as an avant-garde art installation in a sand gallery. But art or not, you feel a slow unraveling of tension behind your temples, like someone gently loosening the clasp of a too-tight helmet. You dab at your lips with a damp cloth, mindful that ingesting clay dust could leave you feeling like you swallowed a pocketful of moon rocks. Instead, you breathe deeply and let each inhalation carry a memory. The smoky myrrh vapors, the cinnamon ginger haze, the donkey milk warmth, and now this clay mist. Every ritual loops back on itself, a callback to earlier nights when you joked about spa treatments in the sand. Yet here you are genuinely drifting toward calm. A fringe scroll fragment claims some seekers even mixed crushed volcanic glass obsidian shards ground to a fine powder, with clay arguing that the glass's sharpness would carve away mental cobwebs before sleep. You shiver at the thought of microscopic glass slicing through your nasal passages. But weirdly, there's a certain internal logic. If hyenas' cackles and wind spirits teased your focus, perhaps a hint of dark glass might cut through mental static and pave the way for deeper dreams. Scholars still debate whether any Ethiopian healers actually risked it, or if obsidian inhalation lore is simply another traveler's tall tale. But the story speaks volumes about human daring in the quest for rest. You feel the clay mask grow heavier, so you reach for a small pouch of cooled spring water and gently mist. Your face tears of condensation run down your cheeks, carrying away flakes of clay like breezes sweeping fallen petals. The lingering mineral scent combines with the spring water's faint ozone tang, and your breathing settles into a slow oceanic rhythm. In that moment, you realize the clay mask is more than skin treatment. It's a sensory signal that sleep is imminent, a halfway point between wakefulness and dream. Beyond the tent, the wind softens to a sighing whisper. You sense the dunes shifting, folding into themselves, as if the desert is tucking itself in too. The canvas walls feel closer now, enclosing you in a cocoon of soft shadows and mineral hush. A memory surfaces of that first sip of spice brew, the donkey milk foot bath, the herbal steam, and you marvel at how each ritual, though wildly different in medium, converges on the same effect, signaling to your body that the world has quieted. You lift a hand to your mask, tracing the gentle cracks across your brow, and murmur, "Sleep like clay molds itself around my mind." The phrase feels oddly poetic, but you're convinced that ancient healers would nod in approval. After all, they wove geology, botany, and ritual into a tapestry of calm. Decades before sensory deprivation chambers or high-tech sleep labs, with one final inhalation of clay-dusted air, you let your head fall back onto the date palm mat. The mask feels like a cool weight against your skin, almost like the gentle pressure of a weighted blanket. A modern trend you read about last week, but now see its ancient counterpart playing out here. A final wind gust rattles the tent, and you picture every clay mote settling like stardust in a bottle, sealing in your drowsy state. You feel your consciousness slipping the edges of thought, blurring into soft focus. The clay mask remains a silent companion, a call back to the earth beneath your feet and the scrolls you've traced. Soon the mineral mist will give way to dreams colored by ochre dunes and basalt ridges, and you'll traverse that landscape with all the ease of a spirit born of sand. You unzip the tent flap and step into a ring of dancing shadows where a crackling campfire hisses in the center and muted drumbeats pulse like a resting heartbeat. The air is thick with smoke curling upward, carrying scents of burning acacia wood and smoldering myrrh resin. You inhale that warm, resinous tang and feel it seep into your chest, sinking with the drums that throb beneath your skin. Around you, Hooded figures sway in a loose circle, arms rising and falling in time, chanting in G's guttural vowels that rise to the moon and tumble back to earth. You probably won't find this kind of sound therapy in a modern wellness app, but here, under the desert sky, it works wonders. By the 7th century, CE Ethiopian Christian communities had adopted liturgical chants known as Yamita, blending pre-Christian ritual drumming with psalmic recitations to foster communal unity and spiritual calm. Mainstream historians note that these Yamita ceremonies often took place after evening prayers in courtyards lit by oil lamps, creating an atmosphere part worship service, part trance ritual. Historians still argue whether the musical elements rooted in earlier pagan rites or emerged independently within monastic orders. But either way, the interplay between drum and chant became a hallmark of nighttime gatherings. You join the circle gravel, crunching beneath your sandals, and raise a hand to touch a framed drum made from stretched goat hide. As you strike its surface, the resonance vibrates through your palm, setting a low-frequency hum that feels primal. A fringe account scrawled on a tattered scroll mentions a legendary sleep drum, crafted from leopard skin and carved basalt, said to produce sonic frequencies that mimic the brain's alpha waves and lull listeners into a semi-conscious dream state. You smile at the mental image of ancient sound engineers fine-tuning leopard drums, but you can't deny the drum's deep hum already tugging at your awareness. The chant shifts from a steady monotone to lilting polyphony as voices weave around the firelight. You feel the communal energy build. Each chant phrase floats on the night breeze, swirling around your head like incense smoke. You probably won't miss the fact that steady rhythms can reduce cortisol levels. Modern science confirms that repetitive drumming activates the parasympathetic nervous system, encouraging relaxation and lowering stress. In this context, though, it feels less clinical and more like an invitation to surrender to the desert's embrace. A playful gust sends sparks from the fire dancing into the starlit sky, and you lean back, letting the heat kiss your face. Elders at the circle pass around a shallow bowl of fermented honey mead infused with crushed basil seeds, claiming a sip will deepen your connection to the ritual. Fringe herbalists today still rave about basil seeds' mucilaginous properties for soothing mucous membranes, though scholars still argue whether the tiny seeds actually cross the blood-brain barrier or if their calming effect is purely psychosomatic. It hardly matters as you swallow that pleasantly viscous liquid feeling. A gentle warmth bloom in your belly as the drums modulate their tempo, slow, then quick, then slow again. You notice that shadows on the sand mimic the chant's cadence, rippling like heat haze in reverse. A quirk tidbit passed down by caravan lore suggests that timing the chant to the moon's waxing phase amplifies its potency, aligning human rhythms with lunar cycles to optimize rest. An obscure footnote warns against chanting under a new moon lest listeners attract restless spirits instead of soothing sleep. You roll your eyes at that superstition Great now I need lunar scheduling for my bedtime, but can't ignore the heightened sense of ritual safety it imparts. Your heartbeat matches the drum's thump, and the line between self and circle blurs. You murmur along with the chant, even though you only know a few phrases, Yo hallelujah haye, each syllable rolling like desert dunes. You feel your muscles unclench and the tension around your jaw dissolves in time with the rhythmic syllables. A mainstream anthropological study notes that communal chanting can synchronize participants' heart rates, effectively creating a shared physiological state, though historians still argue whether ancient practitioners understood this phenomenon or stumbled upon it by accident. You close your eyes, tilting your head back to better catch the chant's harmonic undertones. Somewhere in the backbeat, you think you hear a subtle metallic shimmer, perhaps the faint jingle of an old sistrum, an ancient rattle trumpet used in Axumite ceremonies. Fringe lore credits the sistrum's tinkling frequencies with warding off insomnia-causing spirits acting as sonic talismans to protect the sleeper's mind. You can't see the sistrum clearly through the firelight, but you feel its presence in the high-frequency twinkle mingling with the drum's low hum. A breeze rustles your hair, carrying snatches of chant and ember glow. You sip more mead, savoring its sweet warmth and the gentle stickiness on your lips. The crowd's energy surges, but in a soft, enveloping way. No frantic dancing, just a collective rocking that mirrors the gentle roll of dunes under an unseen tide. You probably won't admit it to your modern self, but there's a profound comfort in being part of this living ritual, a connectivity that dissolves solitary worries. The chant winds down, voices trailing into breathy hums that fade like distant echoes. The drum beats slow to a heartbeat pulse before ceasing altogether, leaving silence so absolute you can hear every rustle of sand grains. A hush falls over the circle, broken only by the crackle of dying embers. You note how the sudden absence of sound feels as potent as its presence, like a final inhale before drifting into exhale. Someone passes you a rolled bundle of aromatic straw loaded with crushed lavender and desert thyme and instructs you to bury it beneath your head. Fringe tradition holds that combining lavender's lavenderin compounds with thyme's thymol vapor creates a synergistic sedative cloud. Though modern phytochemists still argue whether those compounds volatilize sufficiently to have any real effect. You tuck the bundle under your pillow, actually a scrap of woven palm frond, and feel its faint aroma tickle your nostrils. Rising embers cast a rosy glow, and you lie back on your date palm mat. The cool night air mingles with the mead's warmth in your chest, and you sense the ceremony's transformative arc, from steady drumming to echoing silence, from communal chant to solitary comfort. A mainstream historical account mentions that in some highland regions, such rituals extended until dawn, guiding pilgrims into states of trance before morning prayer. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were primarily spiritual exercises or early forms of sleep therapy. But in your case, the result is indistinguishable. You feel ready to surrender. In the final hush, you murmur a whispered joke, best nighttime show in the Sahara 5 stars, and feel a ripple of quiet laughter around you. Then, as if on cue, someone scatters a handful of night-blooming jasmine petals across the fire's ember bed. The petals ignite in tiny flares of perfumed smoke, filling the air with sweet, narcotic fragrance. You inhale one last time, letting that floral elixir coat your lungs. The jasmine smoke drifts over you as you settle your head, its gentle fragrance weaving into your dreams before they even begin. The campfire's glow dims to embers, and you sense the circle dissolving into the night, each participant slipping away back into their own tent sanctuaries. But you lie still, cocooned in the afterglow of ritual sounds, scents, and shared breath. A final thought drifts through your mind. Rituals may belong to an ancient world, but the human need for connection, sound, and ceremony transcends time. Under this moonlit sky, as campfire embers wink out one by one, you drift on a sea of collective memory, safe soothed and slowly surrendering to sleep. You wake as a cool shimmer clings to your lashes, each blink revealing 1,000 tiny diamonds glinting on the tent's woven mat. Dew has settled like a soft, invisible blanket over every surface, and you inhale that clean, earthy tang, like the world pressed a gentle reset button overnight. You probably won't find dew-gathering ceremonies on your modern weather app, but ancient Ethiopian healers treated morning moisture as liquid gold, believing it held the concentrated essence of night's stillness. By the 8th century, CE highland monasteries around Lake Tana constructed stone dew catchers, flat basalt slabs tilted toward the sky, to siphon morning condensation into clay basins. Mainstream historians note that these simple devices provided precious water in arid seasons, supplementing cisterns and wells when rains failed. Historians still argue whether dew collection was primarily a pragmatic innovation or imbued with sacred ritual. But either way, hundreds of those stone catchers dotted pilgrim routes, shimmering in dawn light like alien crop circles. You push aside the tent flap and step onto dew-soaked sand, feeling beads of moisture pop under your sandals. Fringe lore insists that nomadic tribes also used animal skins stretched over wooden frames, letting dew pool overnight before wringing it out like a sponge, an early version of portable stills. You smirk at the image of camels wearing capes of damp fur snoozing through the night, while their humans collected water drip by drip. Whether fashion or function, the method apparently worked. Travelers recorded quenching their throats with dew so pure it tasted like breeze distilled through moonlight. Your fingers close around a smooth river pebble coated in moisture. You trace arcs across your forearm, leaving glistening trails, and recall a quirky tidbit some healers recommended: rubbing dew into temples and jawline to cool hearth fires of overactive thoughts. It's like a facial toner from the Horn of Africa, minus the prickly witch hazel. Though the idea of smearing sand-chilled moisture on your face at 3 a.m. does raise questions about insomnia-induced skincare trends. You crouch to examine a shallow depression in the sand where dew drips have pooled. You scoop a careful mouthful, noting how crystalline droplets seem sweeter than any water you've tasted. A fringe scroll fragment suggests adding drops of pomegranate juice to dew for a mildly sedative cordial, an infusion of fruit's natural tannins and night's distilled calm. You pop a marble-sized drop of juice into your mouth, surprised at the tart, sweet zing, and joke to yourself. Breakfast of desert champions as flavor fireworks distract you from the creeping chill. As you wander to the basalt slab outside your camp, you see dozens of glinting pools, each cradled in carved channels that funnel dew toward a central cistern. You dip a clay cup into one channel, listening to the gentle drip, drip, drip that would have greeted caravans for centuries. A mainstream agricultural text records that farmers in the highlands use dew not only for drinking, but to water seedlings in dry seasons, an echo of today's fog irrigation research. Historians still argue whether dew reclamation techniques spread from monastic gardens to farmland or vice versa. But the cross-pollination of ideas between monks and farmers surely shaped local agricultural resilience. You pace back to camp with your cup, the early light, revealing dew-dappled date palm fronds shimmering overhead. A fringe herbalist's note warns against collecting dew after a rainy night, claiming it would carry the storm's restless spirits, a poetic way of saying that too much wind or cloud cover muddles the dew's purity. You roll your eyes at the mystical language, but can't shake the idea that the quality of moisture might vary by moon phase or wind direction, a meteorological superstition with surprisingly modern echoes in water quality debates. Settling beside the brazier embers from last night, you cradle your cup and let the warmth return to your fingers. You stir in a pinch of pulverized mint leaf, a later addition in local pharmacopoeia, then sip slowly. The chill of dew against the warmth of mint creates a paradoxical tingle across your tongue, coaxing nerves to both awaken and relax. It's a liquid paradox, cold enough to anchor you in the moment, herbal enough to signal bedtime. You swallow and let out a playful sigh, dew tea, because why should fog have all the fun? You trace your cup's rim with a fingertip, watching droplets bead and slide back into the pool. The precision of those carved channels makes you appreciate the craftsmanship, each slab cut and angled to maximize dew, yield a testament to generations of trial error and early hydrology. A quirky marginal note claims that some engineers used ostrich eggshells filled with dew as night lights, the translucent shell glowing softly when held to a lamp's flame, though you suspect that's more decorative folklore than functional lighting. The sun peeks over the horizon, and you feel the dew retreating as warmth returns. You wipe your hands on your tunic, noting how quickly the moisture evaporates into the warming air. Some healers believed that capturing the moment of evaporation was key. Inhale the rising mist to breathe in night's calm. You cup your hands around your nose and mouth, lifting a breath of evaporative humidity. It feels like drinking a sigh, as if the desert itself exhales into your lungs a free aromatherapy session that passes no vetting by modern labs, yet works like a charm. Beyond your tent, you spot a line of pilgrims performing a gentle dew harvest prayer. Each dips fingertips into dewdrops and kisses them with a whispered blessing before dabbing them to forehead and heart. A mainstream liturgical record mentions these blessings as part of dawn vigils, symbolizing the purity of creation renewed each morning. Historians still argue whether those rituals emphasized spiritual cleansing more than physical hydration, but the dual symbolism of water as body and soul tonic resonates through centuries. You bend to pick a handful of dew-chilled wild barley stalks, their dew-laden awns glistening like spun sugar. A fringe remedy suggests crushing those stalks and mixing them into barley porridge to create a sleepy gruel, a far cry from modern overnight oats. The thought of soggy grain soaked in dew makes you giggle breakfast for the truly committed insomniac. But you can imagine the gentleness of grain water and time blending into porridge, so comforting it tucks you in. Rising, you stretch toward the widening light, every movement slick with remaining dew. As you unroll your mat, the damp fibers release a faint, earthy scent, mingling with lingering hints of tedra and incense from last night's rituals. You lie down, dew pooling at the corners of your mat like anointing oil, and let the cool dampness seep into your back, coaxing muscles to relax. The day's warmth will come soon enough. For now, the dew grounds you in a fleeting moment of tranquility. Your mind wanders to academic debates over dew's efficacy. Some modern researchers still argue whether dew collection ever yielded meaningful water volumes or served primarily as ritual metaphor. Yet here, under this desert dawn, you don't need studies or papers to confirm that a sip of dew-infused mint water and a sprinkle of morning moisture can reset your body's clock. You feel the tug of sleep's final tendrils as if night itself tugs a soft blanket over your consciousness. You utter a whispered joke. Who knew the best sleep aid was free weather, and feel a soft chuckle rise within you. The dew's lingering chill and your warming breath create a gentle fog inside the tent, a private microclimate designed to usher you back into dreams. You curl into a fetal position, limbs curled in toward that pool of dew by your side, and let the morning moisture sway your mind between waking and dreaming. The world outside brightens, yet you feel cocooned in a silent lull. Dew's ephemeral gift, harvested by stone and skin, has bridged night's hush and dawn's promise. In that delicate balance, you drift once more, carried on a tide of condensed peace into dreams that shimmer with diamond droplet echoes. You stretch out on your back atop the date palm mat legs, splayed like an open book, and let your eyes roam upward through the tent flap, where the heavens unfold in a tapestry of glittering pinpricks. The night sky here feels infinite, a vast ink-stained canvas, dotted with nebulae that shimmer like distant lanterns guiding lost caravans. You probably won't see this kind of clarity from a city rooftop. Light pollution in modern metropolises makes the Milky Way look like a faint smudge, but in the desert's deep silence, each star feels like a personal invitation to drift into wonder. A mainstream historical fact: Ethiopian monasteries as early as the 5th century CE maintained detailed star catalogs tracking Sirius and Orion's belt to time agricultural and religious events. These celestial records, some scholars assert, were housed in Lalibela's rock-hewn churches, their windows cut precisely to align with solstices and equinoxes. Historians still argue whether these alignments served predominantly liturgical functions or doubled as primitive sleep clocks, signaling optimal rest periods under certain constellations. But either way, the sky's choreography played a vital role in daily life. You pick out familiar patterns first: the plow-shaped belt of Orion, then the bright pulse of Sirius, the dog star you jokingly murmur, imagining a cosmic pup chasing lunar shadows. Fringe lore scrawled in a tattered scroll fragment suggests that healers believe certain constellations emitted subtle astral vibrations, a form of cosmic lullaby, when viewed in a precise sequence. According to that marginal note, gazing from Orion to Sirius to the Jackal Trio, 3 faint stars near the horizon in under a minute could lull even the most stubborn insomniac into easing their heartbeat. You smirk at the concept of celestial soundtracks, but as you trace the pattern with your fingertip in the air, your mind softens at each stellar dot. A breeze sneaks through the tent flap, carrying the faint scent of desert sage mingled with your earlier herbal steam. The juxtaposition of earthy aromas and astral vistas zips a thrill down your spine. You remind yourself to count each constellation slowly: 1 Orion, 2 Sirius, 3 Hyena's Kala, embracing the simple monotony like a lullaby. You probably won't master all the sky's fixtures in one night, but the act of naming each star turns wandering thoughts into gentle tasks, like sorting grains of sand into tidy rows. Some pilgrims once lay for hours under Zikwala Fortress Peak, watching the sky's slow rotation and timing their sleep by the drop of certain stars beneath the mountain silhouette. A quirky tidbit preserved in oral tradition tells of a hermit named Acacia, who claimed that reciting the names of 5 key constellations, backward collar plow belt, dog spear, sent sympathetic vibrations through the cranial bones, unlocking drowsiness. You whisper the backward sequence under your breath, half expecting a cosmic giggle, and feel a subtle weight settle behind your eyes. Modern chronobiologists confirm that focusing on a repetitive visual pattern can encourage alpha brainwaves, nudging the mind toward relaxation. Fringe astrophiles still argue whether ancient healers consciously understood this neural entrainment or stumbled upon it by trial and error. But whether by placebo or genuine biofeedback, the practice endures. You trace the arc of the Milky Way with your finger, the celestial river, as local lore calls it, imagining your mind flowing downstream alongside cosmic currents, each star a ripple carrying you further from wakefulness. You close your eyes briefly, then open them to see how the sky shifts. The faint belt of Orion has dipped slightly, and a pale cluster of stars near the horizon, Crow's Beak, you recall, has risen into view. A mainstream astronomical treatise from the 9th century CE describes crow's beak as a harbinger of cool night breezes, signaling it was time to retreat into one's tent. Historians still argue whether this was a practical weather cue or a poetic metaphor woven into celestial storytelling. But your skin tingles as a fresh gust wafts in, confirming its predictive power. A playful thought flits across your mind. If every constellation had its own bedtime story, what tales would Cygnus the swan whisper? You imagine a sky-born fable of a swan guiding lost travelers to hidden oases, its wings stirring gentle winds that cradle sleepers. You murmur a quick adaptation. Swan swoops low, cradle me slow, and sense your breathing aligning with an internal rhythm, like a puppet on celestial strings. The tent's canvas overhead seems less opaque in this weak starlight, its weave resembling an interstellar net, holding this moment in place. Each star's shimmer reflects off the canvas fibers, creating minuscule glints that dance across your periphery. Fringe observers once argued that the very fabric of tents woven with goat hair could be treated with powdered mica to enhance starlight reflection, turning tents into micro-observatories for dream induction. You chuckle at the image of sparkly tent walls, but can't deny the comforting shimmer above you now. Your thoughts drift to the Tsar exorcism rituals of later centuries, where participants would dance beneath the full moon to expel restless spirits. A quirky marginal note in a Tsar manual insists that concluding the ceremony with a designated star pause, a minute of silent stargazing, helped anchor practitioners' hearts back to tranquility. You appreciate the symmetry, sound, and movement to purge anxiety, then stillness and sight to invite calm. You mimic that pattern, gentle rocking in place, then silent gazing, and feel a subtle hush envelop your mind. You trace a diagonal of stars leading to the Southern Cross, though here it appears inverted, a reminder you're south of the equator. A mainstream navigational guide from medieval Ethiopia confirms sailors used the Southern Cross as a sleep aid, mapping a six-pointed star route and then closing their eyes at the final point to lock in its orientation, purportedly preventing disorientation in dreams. Historians still argue whether dream navigation held practical value or served as mnemonic for actual sea voyages. But as your eyes reach that final star, you let them close knowingly. When your lids flutter open at your own pace, you realize your heartbeat has softened into a steady drum, and the corners of your mind have dimmed like twilight shadows. You imagine the constellations fading into deeper night, their vigil continuing as you slip away. A final whispered joke drifts to your lips. Good night, Orion. Don't wander off without me. And you feel the last tether to wakefulness dissolve in that cosmic hush under a vault of silent watchers. You descend into sleep, guided by starlight's gentle pulse. The desert night holds its breath, and for one moment, you and the universe exhale together. You press your palm against the warm goat hide wall, feeling the canvas vibrate with the echo of hushed voices just beyond the flat practitioners, murmuring words older than most kings, weaving syllables meant to beckon benevolent dream spirits. In this hushed hour, incantations serve as bridges between your waking mind and the shrouded realm of sleep, each carefully pitched vowel a doorway to visions that promise guidance, solace, or at least a break from Sanskrit insomnia. You probably won't find an app that streams ancient dream spells. But in these desert nights, a well-delivered chant is worth more than any lullaby algorithm. A mainstream historical fact. By the 9th century, C.E. Ge'ez language collections of magical spells, often called the Mandarka, circulated among Ethiopian healers, detailing rituals to entice the Orwek spirit into your slumber in hopes of revealing healing dreams. These manuscripts, preserved in monasteries and private libraries, prescribe specific melodic patterns and hand gestures to accompany each verse. Historians still argue whether these ritualistic chants were innovations of Christian scribes adapting pre-Christian rites or direct continuations of ancient Cushitic traditions. But the surviving texts attest to a sophisticated practice of dream magic. You kneel on the date palm mat and close your eyes, guiding your breath in time with a slow 4-beat rhythm learned from a wizened Deptera who taught you under lantern light. Soft syllables escape your lips. La ruwa, ze kesha, fotar sa, words that feel smooth on the tongue like gliding over desert stones. You raise your hands at chest-level, fingers splayed as if cradling invisible orbs of sound, and let the final syllable dissolve into silence. A playful thought crosses your mind. I'm basically chanting myself to dreamland, and that self-awareness tucks another layer of humor under your pillow. Between incantations, you whisper a quirky offbeat tidbit. Some fringe practitioners added powdered scarab beetle shells to the throat potion they sipped before chanting, believing the insect's metamorphosis symbolically coaxed the dream spirit to transform nightmares into instructive visions. You wince at the imagined crunch of beetle dust on your tongue, but can't deny the symbolic poetry. If life and death hinge on transformation, why not borrow metamorphosis itself as a guide through the labyrinth of sleep? Your voice softens to a near whisper as you recite the invocation of the night wanderer, a ritual verse promising lucid interludes. The scroll instructs that each stanza must end with a rising intonation, as if inviting an unseen guest to perch on your shoulder. You feel your heart slow your mind's chatter, dampening like coals, fading to ash. In that moment, you recall a marginal note cautioning against reciting the final lines too loudly, lest you awaken the Capricorn phantoms instead of the helpful Urwek. You smirk at the prospect of chasing helpful spirits out of the tent by overzealous vocal projection. A gentle breeze slips under the flap, carrying the faint echo of distant drum rituals callbacks to last night's Yamita ceremonies and mingles with your chant's dying reverberations. The convergence of sound rituals nudges your senses into a receptive state, the desert's auditory tapestry weaving together fire wind, and incantation. You breathe in tasting hints of myrrh still clinging to your lips from the brew, and feel your consciousness soften around the edges. A mainstream anthropological insight, dream incubation rituals, where one slept in sacred spaces after specific chants were documented at the Temple of Isis in ancient Egypt and later echoed in Ethiopian sanctuaries, suggesting cross-cultural currents of dream magic in Northeast Africa. Historians still argue whether Ethiopian healers adapted these rituals directly from Egyptian precedents or developed parallel practices independently. But the parallels hint at a region-wide tapestry of sleep-crafted spirituality. You lean back on your rolled cloak, repeating a short refrain under your breath, Shara-li. My eyes grow free and let the cadence guide your awareness inward. A fringe manuscript fragment claims that scribes sometimes painted the chant's repeated word in luminous ink. Teaching initiates to visualize glowing letters dancing behind closed lids. You picture those phosphorescent symbols hovering in your mind's eye, spelling comfort in the darkness. Whether that technique truly imprints on the subconscious or stands as poetic embellishment remains a matter scholars still argue. But the mental imagery itself feels like a gentle beacon in the night. With each whispered phrase, your body unwinds, shoulders drop, fingers relax, and your gaze drifts toward the softly glowing embers of a tiny lamp snagged on a wooden peg. You realize these incantations aren't just words, they're carefully calibrated stimuli, invoking rhythm visualization and breathwork in one fluid ritual. A modern sleep therapist might call it a multidimensional cognitive behavioral exercise. You call it ancient spa for the psyche. You repeat the final verse, sending it into the tense hush, Balirah, guide my dream, show me paths unseen. As the last vowel fades, you lie still, letting silence wash over you like a cool desert wave. You notice a subtle shift. The beating of your heart resonates less like anxious drumming and more like a gentle dusk sigh. The canvas around you seems to blur edges, softening into the darkness. A quirked detail floats back. Some healers recommended holding a small phial of dew-infused oil at your throat while chanting, believing the aromatic molecules enhance the chant's potency by entering your bloodstream through your skin. The oil of moonlit breeze, they called it. You feel at your throat. No oil residue remains, but the suggestion underscores how sensory layering played into these rituals. Sight, sound, scent, and touch, all entwining to guide you toward dream realms. You probably won't replicate every nuance, but the core truth remains. Your mind has shifted into a receptive lull, each incantation unlocking a threshold between wakefulness and reverie. In that liminal space, you recall the hyena star sequence and the clay inhalation, the drum circle and dew chants, all callbacks to this moment's soft surrender. The tapestry of rituals weaves together, each thread contributing to a unified design, the art of falling asleep in a world where sand, spirit, and scroll interplay. Your breathing deepens, each inhale a gathering of the desert's night, each exhale a release of lingering tension. You feel your eyelids flutter once, twice, then settle shut with the weight of gentle inevitability. In the black velvet of your closed eyes, you imagine glowing gay as letters dancing in time with your breath, inviting dream spirits to guide you toward healing visions. A final playful thought drifts through, if only my phone sleep tracker knew these spells, and you smile at the paradox of modern tech versus ancient magic. But here, under the silent sky and soothed by your own whispered incantations, you rest easy, knowing that sometimes the best sleep aid is the ritual you craft yourself. Silence becomes a blanket, and your consciousness floats free on the breath of whispered words. The desert around you falls into its own slumber as you drift beyond the threshold, carried by dream-guiding spirits into landscapes uncharted. You light a bundle of frankincense resin and slip it into a shallow clay bowl, then drape a coarse linen cloth over your head, forming a makeshift smoke tent that traps aromatic clouds around your face and chest. The incense crackles, releasing plumes of golden smoke that dance like slow-motion fireflies in the lamplit gloom. You inhale deeply, letting the sweet, piney fragrance roll across your tongue and settle in the back of your throat. It's a sensory cocoon, a private smoke bath that wraps you in centuries of desert ritual. You probably won't get this at your average spa, but it's among the most revered sleep aids in ancient Ethiopian scrolls. Frankincense, harvested from the boswellia trees of the southern highlands, was a trade cornerstone. By at least the 1st century CE, mainstream merchants valued it so highly, Romans coined the term incense money for its worth in bronze and silver. Historians still argue whether the finest grades came from Punt, thought to be modern Somalia, or local Ethiopian groves. But either source produced resin prized for its clean, uplifting scent. Pilgrims to Axum often carried small pouches of resin to perfume chambers and ceremonies. Incense smoke became synonymous with both sanctity and serenity. As the smoke pools beneath your cloth, you feel a gentle warmth on your cheeks. A fringed scrapbook of recipes attributes variations of this ritual to royal courts in the 6th century CE, where courtiers added crushed cinnamon bark and dried basil seeds to the resin for added complexity, effectively creating the world's first layered aroma blend. You shake your head at the indulgence sleeping in a spice cloud, but can't deny that the mingled scents tingle your nostrils like a soothing chorus of herbal lullabies. You notice how the smoke curls into intricate patterns, spirals, filaments, and ghostly tendrils that rise lazily toward the linen roof. Those patterns hypnotize your gaze, coaxing focus away from your racing thoughts. Modern research confirms that viewing slow-moving smoke can reduce beta wave activity, enabling a shift toward alpha wave relaxation. Fringe scholars still argue whether ancient healers understood this neurochemical transition or simply discovered it by trial and error. But the effect is palpable. Your mind feels buffered from worry by a translucent veil. Within minutes, the smoke's resinous sweetness deepens, and you taste faint notes of myrrh carried in by the air currents. Some scrolls recommend blending myrrh and frankincense in equal parts, believing their combined oils produced a balanced psychoactive vapor, calming yet subtly clarifying. You toweling the edge of your cloth to create a slight vent, letting cooler air swirl in and mix with fragrant clouds. The contrast of warm spiced smoke and fresh desert breeze feels like a duet of elements anchoring your body in the physical while guiding your mind into liminal realms. A quirky recipe margin notes that certain healers burned argan oil-soaked pine cones alongside resin, releasing a buttery, sweet smoke that tingled the sinuses. Argan, native to the Ethiopian highlands, produced oil prized for its nutritive and skin-softening properties. But as smoke, you imagine camp cooks tossing pine cones onto coals for dinner aroma, and inadvertently discovering a sleep ritual. Whether argan-infused smoke bath was widespread or a court eccentricity, the idea highlights how improvisation shaped these rituals. Closing your eyes under the cloth, you concentrate on the shifting haze before you. Shadows from the bowl's rim dance across your lids, and the smoke's movement mimics ocean waves, a sensory illusion that tugs at your autonomic nervous system, easing tension at each inhalation. You probably won't have a special vessel for smoke direction at home, but here, beneath your linen tent, every puff feels intentional and precisely delivered. Mainstream liturgical sources record that Ethiopian Orthodox churches burned incense to create a meditative atmosphere during nocturnal vigils. Monastic texts describe priests chanting Psalm 91 as smoke wafted in arches over reverent faces, binding spiritual focus with olfactory stimulation. Historians still argue whether the psalm chant incense pairing primarily served devotional or therapeutic goals, but the ritual's layered sensory design underscores a holistic approach to calm sound, scent, and sight working in harmony. You let the cloth slip from your head, stepping back to let smoke diffuse through the tent. The lingering aroma clings to your hair and clothes, a wearable reminder of your smoke bath. You inhale one last deep draft of resinous air, savoring that warm amber sweetness. Your skin feels lightly dappled by residual smoke particles, each tiny mote a fleeting massage on your cheek. To complete the ritual, you recite a brief rhyme: smoke of earth, hush my mind. Vapors, fine release, and bind. A fringed note insists rhymes synchronized with breath amplify the smoke's effect by synchronizing inhale and exhale with mental focus. Whether poetry or placebo, the act of crafting your own verse, melding intention with action, cements the ritual's power. You extinguish the bundle in fine sand and scoop the glowing embers into a small brazier alongside dried tedra and hops, creating a secondary, gentler steam bath that warms the tent. This final steam carries residual incense oils into the air, ensuring no lingering chill derails your relaxation. A playful aside crosses your mind. It's like an overnight aroma shotgun approach, cover all bases, and you smile at the over-the-top thoroughness. As the tent air fills with gentle steam and smoke, you sink onto your mat cushioned by date palm fibers. The interplay of warmth, humidity, and scent conjures a sense of being enveloped in a living dreamscape. You realize that this ritual synthesizes multiple traditions: monastic incense, courtly spice blends, folk improvisations, into a singular sensory art form dedicated to easing the boundary between wakefulness and dreams. You nestle into your rolled cloak, inhale the final whisper of resinous steam, and feel your heart's tempo slow to match the unseen drip of incense oils dissolving in candlelight. The world outside holds its breath, and you let the amber-hued haze carry you across the threshold. In that soft murmur of cooled smoke and scented steam, you drift toward sleep, guided by a cloud of spice and tradition. You unfurl a coarse linen strip and dip its end into a small pot of camel fat, rendered smooth and scented with crushed desert thyme. The unctuous blend glistens in the lamplight, its texture halfway between butter and balm, warm to the touch, promising deep relief for muscles knotted by days of trudging dunes. You probably won't encounter camel fat rub-downs at your fancy massage parlors, but in these parts it's prized for its thermal properties, seal in heat, soothe aches, and signal your body that rest is imminent. Camel fat, a mainstream medical staple across Nubia and the Horn. Since at least the 3rd century CE, was valued for its emollient and anti-inflammatory qualities, ancient treatises recommend it for chapped skin and stiff joints alike. Historians still argue whether caravan medics sourced the fat from trained pack camels or wild herds. But either way, its abundance made it a go-to remedy. When imported oils ran low, you spread the balm in long, deliberate strokes from your ankles upward, watching how the fat melts on contact, leaving a sheer protective film that warms your skin like a built-in thermal blanket. A quirky tidbit scribbled in a scroll margin suggests mixing powdered frankincense ash into the camel fat to add a faint resinous buzz. Supposedly, the smoke's calming properties transfer into the massage, creating a multi-sensory lull. You smile at the notion of smoky undertones in a body rub and imagine yourself glowing faintly as you walk, leaving a trail of incense aroma behind. Whether the ash actually amplified any sedative effect remains debated. Modern scholars still argue whether those microscopic resin crystals penetrate the skin or simply decorate it. But the ritual feels indulgent enough to quiet any lingering tension. With your leg warmed and your mind soothed, you turn your attention to a more ominous remedy: the scorpion venom salve. A battered leather jar contains a thick paste, pale yellow, flecked with darker specks. Bits of dried scorpion tail grounded to powder and bound with beeswax and goat milk. You probably won't find scorpion venom skincare in today's beauty markets, but fringe healers swore by its neuroirritant properties to induce a mild, localized tingling that distracted from deeper aches and fatigued nerves. They likened it to a burning rope, unspooling the day's stress from your muscles, coaxing a deep body reset before sleep. Mainstream records from the medieval Axiomite court mention sting balms as part of a royal apothecary's inventory, though they caution against over-application too much paste could provoke uncontrollable spasms rather than soothing relief. Historians still argue whether these salves were widely used outside aristocratic circles or reserved for desperate cases of warrior fatigue. But the daring nature of scorpion venom treatments shows how far healers were willing to push the boundaries of comfort. You take a tentative fingertip and dab a tiny amount of the paste onto the back of your hand. The initial contact feels innocuous, just a whisper of warmth, until a gentle heat blossoms, radiating outward in a slow wave. Within seconds, the skin tingles as if kissed by 100 tiny pinpricks, each one prompting nerve endings to fire in rapid sequence. You inhale sharply, then breathe out a laugh, ouch, but kind of mesmerizing, marveling at how the balm's bite distracts your mind from everything but the present sensation. A fringe recipe advises massaging the paste into the shoulders and neck areas prone to accumulating stress, while intoning a chant to unbind anxious cords. You whisper the chant under your breath, a rhythmic chakra release and flow, and feel the blend's mild burn morph into a pleasant numbness that radiates down your spine. The unusual mix of discomfort and relief creates a paradoxical lull. Your mind can't chew on worries when every nerve ending is engaged in its own tiny drama. As the tingling spreads, you reach for a bowl of cool water to rinse the area. Ancient manuals stress the importance of tempering the paste's effect to prevent overshoot into painful spasms. The cool splash transforms the warmth into a fleeting heat wave, like the last ember of a dying fire flickering against your skin. You pat yourself dry and notice how the nerves remain sensitized, a residual hum that whispers, "Pay attention to your lower back and shoulders." Next, you sit cross-legged and scoop a small handful of crushed desert rose petals mixed with goat's milk yogurt into your palms. This soothing counterpaste aims to coat nerve endings with a calming salve after the scorpion sting. The desert rose petals, rich in tannins and known since the 5th century CE as a mild astringent, offer a gentle cooling effect, while the yogurt's lactic acid softens skin and seals in moisture. A quirky note claims that combining sting fire with petal balm creates a yin-yang effect, balancing excitation and sedation in equal measure. Scholars still argue whether any biochemical interplay existed or if the practice served mostly symbolic dualism. But as you smooth the creamy paste over tingling skin, relief washes over you like desert rain. You lean back, pressing your palms into your knees and closing your eyes. The camel fat's comforting warmth, the scorpion paste's distracting sting, and the petal cool down converge into a symphony of sensation, each note calibrated to reset your body's tension threshold. You reflect that modern spa treatments sometimes employ temperature contrast therapy, hot stones, and ice baths, but here, centuries ago, healers discovered an even more adventurous version, living venom and botanical coolants. A mainstream anthropological study notes that such friction rubs in African pastoral communities serve both physical and psychosocial functions. The process of undergoing a pungent treatment created a performance of care-reinforcing community bonds, and trust in the healer's skill, historians still debate whether the communal aspect mattered more than the ingredients themselves, but in your case, you feel cared for by tradition even in solitude. With your muscles humming and your nerves gently awakened, you slowly lie back onto your mat. The amber glow of the brazier casts elongated shadows, and you feel the day's dust and toil melt into the cushions of sand beneath you. A final playful joke surfaces. This is one spa treatment you'll never forget literally, and you smile at how thoroughly your senses have been engaged. You close your eyes and surrender to the residual hum in your muscles, imagining each tingling spot as a tiny drumbeat guiding you toward rest. The ancient friction rituals, bold as they were bizarre, converge into a single purpose: to draw your awareness away from restless thoughts and anchor you in the rhythm of night. As both scorpion venom and camel warmth play their parts, you drift on a wave of sensation, carried at last into a deep sensation-muffled slumber. You curl up on your date palm mat, the night's cool breeze whispering through tent seams, and let your mind drift toward the scrolls you handled, their brittle edges, inked margins, and cryptic sketches. Tonight, you don't apply a remedy or chant an incantation. Instead, you ponder the words of modern scholars gathered around polished tables in distant universities, debating whether any of this desert wisdom truly deserves its legendary status. You probably won't find a televised panel on sleep scroll authenticity, but in dusty academic journals, the arguments fly as fiercely as sandstorms. Mainstream historical consensus holds that many of the medical scrolls attributed to Abyssinian healers date from between the 6th and 9th centuries CE, often copied and recopied by monastic scribes in Ge'ez script. These scrolls reside today in places like the British Library and the National Archives of Ethiopia, catalogued meticulously by paleographers. Historians still argue whether certain scrolls were penned by indigenous healers or merely transliterations of earlier Greek and Arabic manuscripts. But the papyrus exchange, those trade routes up the Red Sea, undoubtedly seeded a rich cross-cultural dialogue in medical knowledge. You trace your fingertip along an imaginary coil of papyrus as you contemplate a quirky tidbit fringe collectors once claimed that one so-called sleep scroll of Yeha was bound in the skin of a water buffalo and contained invisible ink only legible under moonlight. Though mainstream experts dismiss this as romantic fiction, you can't help but smile at the idea of hidden recipes only visible when the silver orb hangs overhead. It's a tale as enticing as any camel caravan legend. In hushed lecture halls, debates swirl over the efficacy of recipes themselves. Some scholars point out that compounds like cinnamon and ginger indeed contain mild bioactive constituents, cinnamaldehyde and gingerol, that can modulate body temperature and circulation, potentially easing muscle tension. Others counter that most recipes lack standardized dosages, rendering any observed benefit as likely placebo. Historians still argue whether the primary value lay in biochemical action or in the comfort of ritual consistency, but you've tasted the spice brew yourself, and felt its warmth settle like velvet in your chest. Then there's the clay inhalation debate. A mainstream geological study confirms that certain ochre clays in the Danakil Depression contain high concentrations of kaolinite, a mineral with absorbent properties. Yet critics note that inhaling fine particulates, even if earth-derived, could irritate respiratory passages rather than calm them. Fringe anthropologists counter that the practice predominated in high-altitude monastic retreats where air is thinner, believing the clay's subtle touch signaled atmospheric shift toward rest. Historians still argue whether clay mist inhalation was genuinely therapeutic or simply an airborne placebo woven into monastic ritual. Across the aisle, bioarchaeologists sift through chemical residues on ancient pottery, searching for traces of donkey milk lipids or camel fat biomarkers in footbath basins. A curious residue test in 2012 detected fatty acids consistent with goat milk proteins in a vessel once thought to hold beer. Scholars still argue whether that vessel belonged to a healer or a brewer, and whether milk-based soaks were practiced as sleep aids or skin treatments. Yet the overlapping evidence hints at a blurred line between gastronomic and medicinal uses. You rest your head on a rolled-up blanket as you recall the drum circle ceremonies. Modern neuroscientists confirm that rhythmic drumming can reduce cortisol levels and synchronize brain waves toward relaxation. However, skeptics point out that the drum's psychological impact likely stems from communal bonding rather than sonic resonance alone. Historians still argue whether Yamita rituals began as pharmacological experiments with fermented brews, or evolved purely as liturgical expressions. Regardless, the combination of chant, drum, and mead created a multi-sensory environment that few would dismiss outright. Finally, you consider the scorpion venom salves. Toxicologists acknowledge that tiny neurotoxins can produce localized tingling and analgesia, but also caution about potential nerve damage. Fringe historians claim royal apothecaries kept antidotes on hand-turning scorpion sting balms into controlled experiments in discomfort management. Historians still argue whether common caravanners ever dared such balms, or if they remained confined to elite circles. But the very notion underscores how far healers went in pursuit of rest. As you lie there, images of clay masks, herbal steams, and dew catchers play behind your eyelids. You sense that the true value of these remedies may not rest in modern validation, but in the human impulse to seek comfort through crafted ritual. You murmur a self-aware joke. Nothing cures insomnia like a 200-year-old argument, and feel a grin tug at your lips. In this liminal moment between the scholarship and sensation, your senses recalibrate. You realize that every debate affirms the scroll's enduring power to captivate our curiosity, even as they resist definitive answers. Whether recorded by genuine Abyssinian healers or echoed from distant Alexandrian scribes, these remedies persist in whispered descriptions and playful anecdotes. You close your eyes, letting the academic disputes dissolve into soft darkness. The desert's night symphony resumes wind against canvas, distant ram calls, and the echo of your own breath. No longer troubled by authenticity debates or clinical trials, you surrender to the scroll's legacy, centuries of human ingenuity, hope, and collective dreaming. And here, at the crossroads of history and myth, you drift into sleep, cradled by the weight of unanswered questions and the solace of midnight's hush. You sink into the final embrace of the desert night, the canvas walls humming softly as a distant breeze threads through goat-hide vents carrying faint echoes of yesterday's drumbeats and today's incense haze. You feel the cool weight of your date palm mat beneath you, its woven fibers pulsing a gentle ASMR rhythm that synchronizes with your slowing heartbeat. In this moment, you're cocooned by centuries of ritual care, every sensation a call back to the alchemy you've woven, spice-kissed, steam, clay dust, inhalations, dew's crystalline lullaby, and the whispered scroll verses still tingling on your tongue. You remember that bittersweet draft of cinnamon myrrh brew section 6, its warmth settling like velvet in your chest, and you smirk at how a tea recipe from the 1st century CE could outspa any 5-star resort, no barista hipster required. You recall the tickle of powdered ochre section 7 under your nostrils and how the clay's earthy hush coaxed your mind toward soft focus like watching slow-motion embers drift in a hearth. You taste the lingering hint of donkey milk, bath milk, section 5, imagining those tiny bubbles fizzing in your toes as you floated between lather and laughter. A mainstream historical fact lingers in your awareness. By the early 4th century, CE Aksumite kings, under King Ezana, minted gold coins bearing Christian crosses, an early testament to how political power and faith intertwined with daily life, including rituals of rest and worship. Historians still argue whether those coins inspired liturgical sleep chants by framing each night as a sacred passage or served merely as trade tools. But their gleam echoes in your mind like a midnight moonbeam on polished metal. You smile at a quirky tidbit fringe healing text once recommended slipping hyena hide slippers under your pillow so you dream the calm of a predator, a suggestion that feels more prank than prescription unless you're prone to running in your sleep. Yet that image of hyena slippers brings a private grin reminding you that humor has always walked hand in hand with healing, even in the harshest dunes. Beneath closed lids, you conjure the sight of constellations. Section 10 tracing Orion's belt in your mind like soft fingertips across velvet. Counting stars becomes a whispered mantra. 1, 2, 3. You feel each number settle like a grain of sand, shaping a steady path from wakefulness to dream. You murmur a gentle joke, "Good night, Sirius." Don't trip over the Milky Way and feel tension melt the humor of final bridge to slumber. You sense the ghost of that drum circle, section 8, its low thrum resonating at the base of your skull, a sonic cradle rocking you toward rest. You almost hear the faint jingle of a sistrum's high shimmer, reminding you that sound can sculpt silence, each note a sculptor's chisel, carving away anxious edges. You probably won't download an app to simulate Yamada chants, but here in your tent, the memory of communal breath and shared beat wraps around you like a familiar shawl. Your fingertips brush the cool edge of a clay flask, recalling the inked scrolls you unrolled, Section 3, their margins speaking of donkey milk ink and ground rhino horn. You chuckle at the thought of writing your dreams on those papyrus sheets. Dear ancient diary, I slept like a rock-ish, and recognize that recording your thoughts has always been a remedy for restless minds. A fringe flourish drifts in a marginal note once advocated, draping a single ostrich feather across your brow as a dream compass guiding visions toward hopeful omens. You imagine that feather dancing above your eyelids, a soft indicator spinning toward the North Star of peace. Whether real or fanciful, the whimsy itself soothes you, proof that imagination and belief weave the same tapestry. As the final traces of incense steam fade into the warm air, you whisper one more affirmation. May the hum of dunes, the kiss of clay, and the echo of chant guard my sleep. That phrase feels like a gentle spell, an ASMR-style mantra tailored to your journey. You breathe in, counting 4 silent beats, then exhale, letting the desert's hush settle in your bones. In this liminal dawn, between wake and dream, you embrace the legacy of countless travelers who, like you, chased sleep across scorched sands and starlit plains. Whether through roasted frankincense, dew-gathered dew, or scorpion sting salves, they pursued the same elusive gift you now claim, peaceful rest. You drift on that promise carried by the collective whispers of healers, merchants, and pilgrims who map these rituals in soot and ink. Your consciousness curves inward, each thought a pebble rippling outward until the surface smooths into stillness. In that silent expanse, you become both observer and participant, held in the gentle gravity of memory and hope. Wind down. You breathe slowly, the canvas around you fading into a soft vignette of shadows and embers, each exhale dissolving yesterday's worries into the night. The tent walls become translucent membranes, filtered moonlight pooling like silver ink at the corners of your vision. You feel your limbs growing heavy, each finger and toe sinking into the cushions of sand, as if the very ground beneath you is tucking you in. Your heartbeat slows to a gentle tide, matching the hush of wind against canvas. You sense the traces of spice-kissed steam still clinging to your skin, a faint warmth that whispers reassurance against any lingering chill. The clay's earthiness and the brew's sweet smoke fuse into a private lullaby that hums beneath your breath. In this rare moment, every sense invites rest. The soft brush of quilt edges the distant echo of dream-invoking chant, and the lingering scent of desert time converge into a single siren call surrender. You feel yourself floating, buoyed by centuries of healing hands and whispered scroll verses, each page turned by seekers before you. Slowly, your mind sways between 2 worlds, half here, half adrift, guided by a gentle promise that sleep awaits. You recall the taste of date honey ribbons dissolving in brew, the cool kiss of dew, dripping from foxtail grasses, and the warm seal of camel fat salve easing muscle tension. Each memory becomes a stepping stone across a silent stream, carrying you onward. There's no need to chase dreams. They come to meet you here. You inhale one last time, tasting the mingled notes of desert oasis, sage myrrh, and distant rain. Your exhale is a sigh of release, a final act of letting go. Now, as your eyelids flutter shut and the world beyond slips away, know that you are wrapped in the desert's gentle embrace. The scroll's legacy rests lightly upon you, guiding you into a realm where sleep unfolds like a soft petal. Sweet dreams.